come back for the second. India have won the Test match. India have won the series. They're going to get back for two. India home. Lords goes wild.
Hello and welcome to a new episode of the 81 All Out podcast. This is Siddhartha Vaidyanathan at Sidvi on Twitter. And I'm joined by my co-host today, Ashoka, who is ABVan on Twitter, familiar to all the listeners of 81 All Out. Hi, Ashoka. Welcome.
Hey, Sidvi. Nice to be here.
Great to be here. And today we are joined by two special guests to talk about Australia's historic tour to Pakistan that just concluded recently. Australia hadn't gone to Pakistan since 1998. So they went there after all these million years, had a great time, finished off on a winning note in the tests, had an enthralling one-day series, and then wrapped up with a victory in the T20. To talk about that, we have two journalists who were on the tour. I'm sure won't forget it for a very, very, very long time. We have Adam Collins, who is a journalist, broadcaster, writer, host of the famous podcast, The Final Word, with Jeff Lemon. Hi, Adam. Great to have you here.
It's wonderful to be on your show. Thanks for inviting me on.
Thank you. And we also have another journalist and broadcaster, cult hero, rediscoverer of Patrick Patterson. I mean, I can just go on. But yeah, in short, Beastie Boy on Twitter, works for CricBuzz, but does so many other things. Hi, Bharat. How are you?
Hi, Siddhartha. Thank you for having me. And I have another major title: someone whose Hindi passes off as Urdu allegedly in Pakistan. So I say that with a lot of pride.
Oh, fantastic! Yeah, then you have really arrived, because I remember back in 2006, I went to Pakistan, and my Hindi, Urdu, everything was so pathetic. So even I just had to say a word, and they're like, "Oh, you're from India. Great to have you."
I think the only difference is you were representing India, I was representing Australia. So even if I had spoken Tamil, they would have accepted it. That's the only difference.
Yeah, absolutely. So great to have both of you here and to talk about once in a lifetime tour, I'm sure, for you. But let's talk about the build-up and the constant will they, won't they, the security issues, and of course this came like after the Ashes. So, there was the whole hype of the Ashes that was happening and everyone talking about that. But in a historical context, as much as Ashes has its great value, but this had something even more of history going for it, wasn't it? Yeah, talk a bit about the build-up and how things were with the uncertainty. Adam, you can go first.
Sure thing. Look, the expectations were managed down so low with Australia visiting Pakistan, not just because of the 24 years, but perhaps more so because of what happened with New Zealand and England last year. Just to refresh the memories of your listeners, the New Zealand team pulled out due to a threat to the broader squad, which we later learned to be something online, something unsavoury, but it was sufficient for them to consider it credible and pulled the pin having already arrived in Pakistan. Indeed, it was the morning of the first one-day international. So it was quite abrupt, and it wasn't long after the Taliban's takeover of Afghanistan. So there was a sense that, okay, we came really close to having cricket back in Pakistan full-time, but this was going to set it back. And inside the same week, England's team pulled out of going. It was the men and the women scheduled to visit. And instead of going there, Owen Morgan's team preferred to mostly stay at the IPL in Dubai. There were no security considerations. They cited, in effect, some tired boys who couldn't be bothered to go on a 4-day tour. And at that juncture, my expectations were that, well, there's the fig leaf. If New Zealand and England have pulled out, CA, who have a pretty dreadful record as global citizens, travelling not only away from home, but also hosting teams in Australia. It's been 2003, back to 2003 since the last time that Australia hosted Zimbabwe and Bangladesh for test matches, for example. The number of times they've pulled out on Bangladesh in various ways. And even what happened to South Africa last year during the COVID period, it meant that I don't think that any of us really thought it was going to happen in Pakistan. And then Nick Hockley became the full-time chief executive of Cricket Australia. And it felt as though he came into that position with a determination to make it happen. And maybe, and Bharat will have a view on this as well, but I think because the reputation of Australia being so low at that point, in what I referred to before, there was a need to correct that. And the corrective was going to Pakistan and in one fell swoop, looking like the best global tourist in the world suddenly.
When New Zealand and England pulled out, I personally thought, no, Australia will definitely go. Because the only reason I say that is it looked so, at that point, improbable that they would go, that you started believing that maybe they will end up going. Australia now have no option but to say yes, because everybody expected them not to go at all. I mean, like Adam said, people had given up. People had already started talking about maybe that series will happen in the UAE. Surely Australia will find enough reason not to go. And also a big difference between the England and New Zealand tours to this one is this was a full month-long tour, all formats. And then you thought maybe they might, narrow it down to a one-day series, 1 week in one city, fly in, fly out. But when they continued to say that, no, whatever happens, we'll make sure we'll keep our date, we'll go and we'll play all formats. You started actually believing in it. But then the Ashes started, and just hearing some of the murmurs from the players in the nets and all, again, lost faith, because a lot of the players didn't seem too keen. I mean, they were so non-committal. Even Pat Cummins in press conferences, whenever it was brought up, he wouldn't say, I mean, we would love to go. Like, they would keep saying, our security team is there. They'll give us our updates. We'll look at it. But they were so non-committal. So then you started feeling maybe they won't go. But once that test squad was announced, and it's funny, right, Adam? Like, even after the test squad was announced and it was full strength, people expected dropouts till the last minute, till Australia actually landed there. And, all the players, maybe that's why they started posting pictures on social media. Steve Smith lying on the bed, strange first arrival picture I remember on Instagram, maybe to just tell the world that, yes, we are indeed here. It's not a rumor. The Australian team, full strength Australian test team has landed in Pakistan. And that's when we believed it.
It's not like a faking of the moon landing sort of hoax, conspiracy theory, tinfoil hat stuff.
Yeah, I think the moral of the story is that, if the Poms and the Kiwis do something, the Aussies can't just follow them. They have to do something different, right? So they can't. They have to show the superiority there. It brings me, it takes me back actually to 1996 during that World Cup, when the fears were around Sri Lanka and how Australia and West Indies boycotted. I mean, they didn't go to Sri Lanka. They had to forfeit that game. And how back then, I'm imagining the cultural difference between the subcontinent and Australia would have been considerably vast. I mean, you even had Mark Taylor making statements like, this doesn't happen in our part of the world, and so we react differently and things like that, which seems like from a different age almost, because now we know that it happens in all parts of the world, and that it's not like only one particular region that is responsible for this. So I mean, culturally, and even for you too, I mean, growing up, your view of Pakistan might have been vastly different from what your view of Pakistan as a country is today.
But perception of Pakistan, I mean, I grew up in Bombay, and, it was all, it wasn't anti-Pakistan, but they were kind of built up as, I can't put it in any other way, it's not nice people, like people who would look at you as an enemy. I mean, so that fear factor was always built up around them. And I'll tell you a story. In 1992, when the World Cup happened, and if you remember, the song was like, "Who Will Rule the World?" And I remember, just playing cricket in my building. And when Pakistan won, just singing "Pakistan will rule the world." And a lot of people got upset with me. Like, I was just a 7-year-old child, but just even singing out "Pakistan will rule the world" meant like, people would jump on you. And, there would be all these stories in Bombay. There's a suburb, Adam, in Bombay called Kurla, not too far from where I grew up. And there would be these stories that, the cops are always around Kurla when Pakistan and India play. Because every time Pakistan win, there are firecrackers that go off in Kurla. So there was all this negativity built around Pakistan, and how, yes, we were one, but they're very different. Like, they will look at you suspiciously. They won't want you there. And even though India did tour there in 2004 and 2006, those were different times. Like, you guys were welcomed with both arms. The buses were going back and forth from Delhi and Lahore and all. Like, that was a different era. but 2022, considering that while I was applying for my visa, Imran Khan was tweeting about how it was 3 years since he had taught India a lesson at the border and all that. So as someone with an Indian passport, I was like, okay, what am I getting myself into here? Like, it's inevitable that those thoughts did get into my head. But I was just curious. Having met a lot of Pakistani people, really nice Pakistanis in cricket as journalists and cricketers, you kind of knew that it wouldn't be so much on a one-on-one basis. Nobody's going to look at you as the enemy. But just what would it be like once I left the hotel and walked on the streets? So these doubts were there in my head, I'll be honest. But they just went off. The moment I landed there, and once the classic immigration official, who we all used a lot in our copies, landing copies, just how friendly and helpful he was, despite being suspicious of my visa to start with, kind of told me that, once I enter Pakistan, it's a completely different country to how it's built up.
Yeah, and to sort of pick up on the start of your point there, Sid, the cultural piece around 1996, I think that's a really interesting moment in time. I made a documentary a couple of years ago called The Final Frontier, an audio documentary on the greatest season that was podcast feed with Dan Brettig and Shannon Gill. And what we tried to do was get to the nub of the rivalry between Australia and India. And the truth is, until 1996, there kind of was none, because they'd seldom played against each other for the previous decade. There's the Tide Test in 86. There's the bilateral series in 91, 92 to Australia, when the Indians felt like they got a really rough run of it with the umpiring and all the rest of it. There's the World Cup later that summer. And then there's really nothing apart from a one-off test match in Delhi in 1996, a little bit of limited overs fare, but not an awful lot until they start playing each other consistently in 1998. And the reason I raise that is that there was an otherness to the subcontinent as a whole. It wasn't about Pakistan, India, or Sri Lanka. There was just a sense of that's a very different place, and I couldn't possibly understand that very different place, for I am an Australian kid. So that's changed as the cricketing landscapes become more homogenised, and touring, and we'll never probably entirely appreciate the impact of the IPL in the relationships between players, and brilliant bilateral series like 2001, and Sri Lanka winning the World Cup in 1996 against Australia, and Pakistan being frequent visitors to Australia all the way back from World Series cricket days. And when they had the World Series Cup each summer, Pakistan were in Australia all the time. So even though there was a sense of being familiar with the players, actually being familiar with the country, different thing altogether. So for me, visiting Pakistan, I had a sort of an abstract academic understanding of what Pakistan would be that was governed by looking at, I suppose, old vision and the recent matches that have been played there. But having been to India and Sri Lanka and Bangladesh, I had no comprehension of how different Pakistan would be one way or the other. And as Bharat's already pointed out, upon arrival, you are treated with the most extraordinary hospitality. Even before I landed, I popped a tweet up saying I was flying to Islamabad, and I was bombarded with replies on Twitter saying, this is the country of hospitality. You're going to be treated so well. And so it was. We were from the minute we landed to the minute we took off, treated exceptionally well. I never felt remotely in danger. And that included when Bharat and I went walking up to the Zainab Market in Karachi when there was a protest going out the front around Imran Khan, building TV cameras everywhere, in the thick of things, right in the thick of things. It was more that people were greeting you with, how I felt anyway, with a smile, knowing you were probably there as part of the cricket tour. And in turn, they wanted to welcome you because the more cricket they can have played in Pakistan, the better.
Yeah, I think, the work that people like you and Bharat do are often underestimated. But in cases like this, I think it's extremely important for people like you to go there, to experience it, to write your reports, to talk about it on your podcasts, on your shows, because that is the bridge between what is happening and what people back home are listening. I mean, in the 1980s, you spoke about that time of otherness. I mean, that's why people like Mike Coward, the doyen journalist who covered tours to India and Pakistan, are so valuable because he was there to document what was happening. And, the achievements of people like Alan Border, early Steve Waugh, Dean Jones, all these achievements might have been totally lost if not for people like Mike Coward and the ABC radio tours and everyone else actually bringing out what was happening. I mean, honestly speaking, I think Alan Border is a bigger legend in parts of Madras, in Chennai, than he is in parts of Queensland. And that's because people in Chennai really, really sort of revered what a great batsman he was. And Pakistan, you're talking about Pakistan, some of Alan AB's greatest innings came in Pakistan with the
twin
test
tons
in Lahore. Yes, twin tons in Lahore. And I would even argue that one of Australia's greatest one-day achievements was that semi-final win in the 1987 World Cup, where they just beat the favourites, Pakistan, in Lahore. And that I don't think that victory has got anywhere close to the sort of prestige that other Australian wins have got. So I think writers and journalists are so important in this process. So let's come to day one, Adam. I mean, you were there. Bharat was still trying to figure out whether he could be there. Talk about that, the sort of getting to the stadium, the build-up, the whole anticipation, and also, we'll get to it later, the jolt at the end of the day with the news about Shane Warne.
Yeah, that's right. So, I mean, we'd been there the previous couple of days to set up, as you do, so we knew what we were walking into physically, but the heightened security on morning one, it can be quite jarring seeing that many machine guns and that many Kalashnikovs. I mean, it's just not something you're conditioned to, even though you know they are there to protect you and others who are there to be at the cricket. It still is jarring. So that's a striking memory of being rocking up to the Rawalpindi Stadium on morning one. But then as soon as we were through the security checkpoints and walking around the ground where we entered at Pindi was a long way from the press box, so we had a bit of a chance to take it all in. We took a photograph with the group, realising it was an important sort of historic marker. It was a very hot morning, and we knew it was Friday prayers that day as well, so it would be an unusual sequence of the sessions with 90 minutes before lunch, 150 minutes after lunch, with 60 minutes in the middle. So we kind of were taking in all that information, and there was this overwhelming sense of this is what it's all about. This is why we're here. And even though that wasn't a particularly eventful day of cricket from memory, it was 2:45 for one at the close. But Imam getting to 100, I mean, he played a lot of cricket against Australia. He made a really important 70-odd on the first day of the series in Dubai, but then 4 years earlier, but then really struggled in 2019 in Australia. But I feel like we'd seen a lot of Imam at the World Cup white ball cricket as well. To see him, get that in that familiar prayer position upon reaching three figures for the first time in Test cricket, and Azhar Ali doing likewise, another player who we'd seen play so much over the journey, having made his Test debut against Australia in 2010. So even though it was a notionally relatively bland day of cricket, I remember us leaving the stadium and just being absolutely chuffed. We were buzzing to a person. We were just like everyone, a lot of cynicism in sports journalism, a lot of cynicism. I suppose it's natural when you work in this industry to be to downplay things and to be a bit too cool for school. But there was none of that evening when walking back around that long walk back to where the cars were. We were just like, that is bloody special. That might be something. This might, who knows when this might happen again. And we've been part of it, and we've seen it. And the call to prayer late in the day when we were leaving the ground, hearing that bellow out across the stadium, and then we got in our vehicles, and when we were about 2/3 of the way back to the hotel, as you say, the extraordinary news, extraordinary for all the wrong reasons, news came through that Shane Warne had passed away. And I remember being in the car with Tom and Jeff, and Tom was on Twitter filing something. He wasn't on Twitter. He was filing something in the car, just some quotes, I think, from memory. And I was next to him, and he goes, "Fuck, Warnie's dead." And I go, "What?" And he goes, "Yeah, Will McPherson tweeting, look at this, Fox Sports." He showed me, and Jeff didn't hear me, and I'm like, jaw agape. And I said, and Jeff looked around, and I go, "Shane Warne's dead." And Jeff just didn't believe it. Jeff was like, "Nah, that can't be true. That must just be." And we're like, no, Will's quote tweeted Fox. It's Fox Cricket. It's a statement. It's like, this has happened. And the next 10 minutes were the longest 10 minutes, as we just were like, I don't think barely a word was said, really. Tom managed to send out the first cut of the story for the Sydney Morning Herald from the back of the car. And then I suppose from a news perspective, but behind the scenes, he was up all night writing and managing the blog and all the rest of it. We were all doing different work through that night. But yeah, the contrast from the sheer joy that we all felt at 7 p.m. to the desolation and despair that dominated not only the rest of that night, but the rest of that week, really. It wasn't a great test match. And yeah, there was a chance to celebrate the life of Shane Warne, but most of it was just unable to believe that such a massive presence in Australian and world cricket had died, and it just happened to be coinciding with a day of significant history around the world of global cricket.
Yeah, but Bharat, you have stuff to add. I mean, you had your own sort of uncertainty going on with the visa, and then you had Shane Warne. You, of course, had to react to that. You wrote a piece and you did a lot of things around that. So, yeah, I want to talk a bit about that moment.
Yeah, I mean, I remember, so I just finished watching the first day's play on TV. I was debating whether I should write on Imam or not. Like you said, still fighting the uncertainty of whether I'll be there or not. Mixed feelings, right? You were like, I could hear, I was listening to SE and Adam on radio, and you kind of feel like I could have been like, will I be there? This test is gone. So I'd given myself time till the second test. If I can't get there till the second test, then it's up in the air. And Adam and I had spoken about, doing commentary together in Pakistan. I remember during the Sydney test, we had this. So that's when Pete Lawler had tested positive for COVID, and we were in the same commentary box. So Adam and
we were locked in a box for a day.
Pretty much, yeah. And that was the SCG dinner night. So everybody else was outside having beers. They would leave beer outside the room, and Adam and I would just the two of us. So all that emotion was already built up. And I remember pulling up my laptop, and I found this beautiful intro for Imam ul Haq. So, as any journalist, I was very happy. I was like, "Theek hai. I mean, this will take me half an hour now." I watched some of his interviews and all. Put down the intro. I was like, then I just took a break. You know how it is. You've done with the intro. You want to do something else. Go onto Twitter. And I saw the Fox Cricket tweet. And I literally just threw my phone away. You almost felt like, because earlier that day I'd done some TV work on Rod Marsh passing, and I had very little to do with Rod Marsh. Shane Warne, of course, similar to Adam, you bump into him in the press area, the media center. And I had a few conversations with him, random conversations, mostly about how both he and I would get excited that there would be no day 4 in a match. That was pretty much the crux of most conversations I've ever had with Shane Warne.
Coming back to the series and in Pakistan, Shane Warne, of course, the cloud over that death was going to be around for a long time, and I'm sure it still is hard to believe that he's gone. But Adam, let's get to the cricket itself. I mean, we've seen quite a few years now of bowler-dominated matches. A lot of cricket around the world has been, people have been saying that we are living in the bowling era now for a while. And then with that in mind, to then see the way the first test panned out. I mean, the second and the third test had their moments for the bowlers. I mean, had glorious moments for the bowlers. But the first test was almost like, we will make sure that this is the revenge of the batters kind of match, right? I mean, they just batted and batted and batted. So how was it like just watching that live?
Yeah, it was a bit of a throwback. I mean, I'd forgotten what it was like to watch cricket like that in the flesh. Jared Kimber's done a lot of good work documenting the era of the seam bowler from about 2018 onwards, if I recall correctly. And we're conditioned to seeing test matches finish prematurely, not end with hands shaken on day 5 at the earliest possible time in order to get out of there and get out of Dodge. And you felt like bowlers were the probability of a team taking 20 wickets inside 5 days with the usual rhythm and conventions of Test cricket was never possible from about halfway through day 2. Just thought this is never going to happen. So with that degree of inevitability added to by the fact that there was a bit of rain about on morning 4, I think it was, where we missed a session. It was like we kind of knew that from there it was about the marginal gains that they might be able to take into the second test match. How many overs can, you get into the opposing team's fast bowlers and that kind of thing. And Pakistan ended it so well, 236 for no loss on the final day, with Shafique making his first test 100, with Imam completing twin tons, with, it got to the stage where Pat Cummins just had to bowl Travis Head and Usman Khawaja bowled at one point to avoid putting any overs into the legs of himself, Starc and Hazlewood. That's not much of a test match. In fact, the main takeaway was, Nathan Lyon against Pakistan averages 50 plus. It's been his bogey side over the years with a couple of notable exceptions. And maybe he's going to be under enormous pressure at Karachi. And so it turned out to be. He fought back well in Karachi at the very death of that test match, and then was instrumental to winning the series at Lahore. But, Pakistan did a good job at denting his confidence at Rawalpindi on that final day. He only took one wicket for the entire test match. And it felt at that juncture like we could be trending towards an absolutely disastrous series, because there was just a bit of a nagging sense that this was orchestrated. I mean, Ramiz Raja said words to the effect of they were never going to give a sucker an even break when it came to the Australian quicks. They weren't going to present to them anything remotely like the conditions they prepared for England, not least at Hobart, to finish the series on a green top. They were going to go the other way and ensure that their batting lineup had the best possible chance to neutralise Australia's threat with their big quicks, and so they did. So, I think we left Rawalpindi a little bit anxious that, let's hope that this improves, and let's hope that the surfaces will allow for more competitive balance between bat and ball, because if they don't, as good of an experience it is being in Pakistan and the history after 24 years and all the hospitality I've referred to already, it'll start to very quickly diminish as far as the story we can tell, unless the cricket improves, and thankfully it did.
Yeah, and at this point of time, I mean, I was... I have to, the final day, I mean, the final innings that Pakistan played, there were 252 basically for no loss. And Imam made 111. I'm looking at the scorecard. Abdullah Shafique made 136. And I was watching, I'd never seen much of Abdullah Shafique before. And, I saw a bit of the strokes that he was playing. And this context of this match is like the match is dead. The match is gone. But here's this really beautiful batter who is like trying to, there's a certain sort of visual pleasure in watching a player like that. And it was hard for me to reconcile what is going on here. I mean, I'm admiring this, but is it even, what is the meaning of this? Did you have that bit of bizarre thoughts as well?
Well, I could certainly appreciate what we were seeing. Look, in summary, the Shafique story is a wonderful one in that he played one game of domestic first-class cricket. He was rushed into the Pakistan A team. He played 2 games there, made 100 at the first time of asking. Then he's playing Test cricket, averages 70 in his first series, walks out against Australia, rattles off a chanceless 100 in the second dig. I mean, after the 96 he made, I think it was 96 he made at Karachi in the second innings, I'd sort of declared there and then, Pakistan have had Yunus Khan as their leading run scorer. Well, Babar Azam will be their next man to 10,000 runs, and Abdullah Shafique will be the one after that. Prove me wrong. He seems so good, so organised behind point. Wrists like Lakshman threw him in wicket. A sturdy defence, can bat for hours. The fact in that Karachi innings, he batted for nearly 300 balls and hit 6 boundaries. And then he can go the other way and accelerate like a limited overs cricketer. He seems to have all of the clubs, all of the tools. And he's going to be a massive fixture of our cricketing lives for the next generation.
You're a brave man, Adam, to make a prediction about a Pakistani cricketer. But that's we'll watch out for that.
I'm sorry for your Indian listeners to say this, but in all probability they'll never play against Abdullah Shafique because he probably won't end up in the white ball teams, and the probability of Pakistan playing India in Test cricket during Shafique's career is regrettably next to zero. So you've got no concerns there.
Bharat, you did write a piece about Shafique, maybe multiple, but there was this very interesting conversation you had with his dad. You want to elaborate a bit on that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm with Adam though. Like we were on air for most of Shafique's innings. It felt like every time Adam and I were on together, Abdullah Shafique was batting, and we were impressed. Like he could play shots all around the ground. It was one of those classic stories where I got hold of his father, who lives in the UAE. And for me, the most fascinating thing was how little time he spent with his son. Because I think I started the story with how Shafique was 3, and his father would visit him once every 6 or 7 months because he moved to the UAE to do some coaching. He's a former first-class cricketer. Shafique Ahmed's his name. And he walks home and he sees his son with a plastic bat, apparently playing shadow practicing some perfect front foot defense and hitting cover drives and all that. And he asks his wife whether she'd been sending him for cricket coaching behind his back. And the wife says, no, I actually bought him the plastic bat just yesterday. So I don't know where he's picked it up from. And the father, proud father, was convinced that cricket does run in our blood because his brother has played some one-day cricket for UAE. I think Arshad Ali is his name. Even made a half century against Bangladesh. He said it's 41, but we'll count it as a half century.
That's Shafique's uncle, right? Yeah.
Shafique's uncle. Yeah. So, and then he was convinced that this kid is made for the big league. But still, he never had that overbearing parental kind of an approach to Shafique's career. He stayed away because literally he was staying away. So they would meet each other once every 6 months. He would never ask for anything. So the father would only bring a lot of new balls for him so that his son never ran out of balls to practice with. And it was like a sweet, story, and the dad kind of watching him from afar and how he has never seen a single ball of Abdullah Shafique live. I mean, there are a lot of parents who say that, but this guy is genuinely he wouldn't know what has happened to his son. He's only watched his son bat in highlights. And, thankfully for him, Abdullah Shafique is such an attractive batter that the highlights packages make him look even better than it would if he was to watch an entire Abdullah Shafique inning. So, it was a sweet little story, which I did. But just on the first test itself, I landed there on day 5. Watching it on TV, said I just told myself this: cover it like the Ranji Trophy, because the one thing, Adam said, for him it was a throwback to how Test cricket used to be, the hard grind. I spent 10.5 years of covering Cheteshwar Pujara making a 100, Karun Nair making a 100, Jadeja making 100, Rohit Sharma making 100, and the game's just and you train yourself to write about the same thing in a different fashion somehow. So it's funny, even during the Test series, I would walk into the press box from the commentary box. You'd hear other Australian journalists say, what do we write today? And I'm like, no big deal. Something will come to you at the end of the day, because that's how Ranji Trophy cricket is. And to a large extent, so is Sheffield Shield cricket, especially in Adelaide, where pitches don't do much. The game doesn't come alive till day 4. And that's why every time Adam and I spoke about what was happening, I kept telling him the same thing. Don't worry. The games come alive in this part of the world very, very late in the day, or late in the Test match. And we've seen so much of that growing up in India, right? Test cricket was, unless it was England who came in the 90s or some country from Australia or in England, the pitches were flat. I mean, India-Sri Lanka Test series would go into day 5. A lot of runs used to be scored. So we were kind of used to it. So for me, it was a throwback in that sense.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to criticize what happened in this series with respect to the pitches, then you haven't seen the Premadasa Stadium in 1997. Sri Lanka made 950 runs, and a lot of us watched that Test match, and we had tears in our eyes, and we were like, are we ever going to live after this? What is happening?
I came back from school for 3 days asking, has Mahanama got out? I know Jayasuriya is not getting out.
Yeah.
I know Jayasuriya is not getting out this week. At least as Mahanama got out. So
somewhere that partnership is still going on.
It's going on.
Kulkarni is still waiting for a second Test wicket, I'm pretty sure.
Exactly. So yeah, I mean, I think that's the other issue, right? Now, if you look at the Rawalpindi Test now, the way you think about it, there's a much more a historical angle that comes in. This was the first Test Australia played in for so many years. There was such a overwhelming historical context to it. But in that moment, and when you're writing the end of days report, or when you're commenting on the end of day, it's so easy to say that, this spells the death of Test cricket or something so drastic, which is not at all true.
I think we have to also celebrate the other 2 draws that happened in the West Indies. So March was a month for draws.
Oh, yeah. The batters finally they could cash in.
Yeah. If not for India, Sri Lanka, I think this would have been a renaissance month for batsmen. I think India Sri Lanka ruined it by having like 2-day tests and 3-day tests.
Yeah, that is true.
Yeah, it would have been a great month. I have a slight different point of view from both Adam and Bharat, because I have no dog in this fight, in this whole series. I was just a neutral, and I had a choice of watching either India Sri Lanka or Australia Pakistan, and having two laptops, one for work and one personal laptop. I just open it on the background. It's just a very therapeutic thing to watch a test match cricket on mute, and especially when nothing is happening, because when the bowlers get a chance, and the bowlers that there are going around in this circuit across most teams, you can't afford to have the therapeutic experience. I think your heart starts pumping at like 150 miles per hour, and especially if it's Cummins and Starc, right, going full tilt. I think if that were to happen, my workday would have been ruined. So thankfully, they were plugging away. I mean, they were not giving anything else. That is something that we need to acknowledge, because sure, they didn't find much help, but keeping batsmen under 3 in this pitch for like 150 overs. Of course, they gave up in the second innings, but first innings, I think they didn't give much away. In fact, I think Shafique and Imam had to attack Lion because there was no runs coming from the other end. Hazelwood didn't give anything away, nor did Cummins or Starc. So they had to use their feet and come down. And I think Shafique gets out in the first innings trying to force the issue. So I think Australia did all they could do on that pitch on day 1 and day 2. It was just, unfortunate that they didn't get anything out of it.
So you're suggesting that an alternative therapy is like watching Imam and Abdullah Shafique bat. That's like
no. I'm suggesting the therapy is Azhar Ali. That is the solution. Watch Azhar Ali bat for 7 hours. All your mental problems are sorted. I think you'll reach eternal calm and peace in life.
All right. So as the listeners of 81 All Out know, Ashoka is the arch contrarian at all points, and he has made that contrary point here as well. Let's move on to Karachi, which was, the scene of the second test. Karachi, of course, being, again, another historical cricket venue. National Stadium in Karachi has so many stories. I mean, it was the fortress for Pakistan for many, many, many years. And, England went there and won a match in the dark. I mean, they pulled off this chase in the dark. And it looked like Pakistan would lose another match in Karachi, given the way Australia went ahead in that game. But they held on. And that would have been quite a dramatic scene. So, yeah, Adam, want to start with that test and all that happened before and into it?
Yeah, sure. Just some brief thoughts about Karachi with it. As you say, a fortress of sorts. They only lost 2 test matches there ever. The first was as you say, in the dark with Graham Thorpe in 2000. So I think there was an expectation that it would be a very tough test match to win for Australia, whereas Rawalpindi, it was more about, well, maybe this will be the surface that's most likely. That was repudiated by what was dished up. So Karachi felt like a higher degree of difficulty. But what an amazing cricket stadium! What an amazing place to be, with the colourful seats that were so striking on television when I was a kid growing up, and then in the last couple of years. And as Bharat said to me, it was like when he was growing up, grounds that he would go and watch the Indian team play at. So there was a sense of it being a proper special cricket ground initially. When we were there beforehand. And then we were in this wonderful vantage point on the balcony, just above where the players' balcony was, which meant that we could look directly down upon them as they went on and left the field. That was really quite lovely. So we were able to correspond with the players more in that setting than in any other real that was the best chance we had on tour, because other than that, it was just Zoom calls, and we know how difficult it can be to conduct a conversation with a cricketer on a Zoom call with countless other people. So that was lovely. Australia, the test match itself was similar to Cardiff in 2009 in that they made a lot of runs in the first innings, then bowled out Pakistan cheaply. And then it was the third innings of the match where Pakistan were able to hold on despite having a victory target of roughly 550 and 5.5 sessions to bat. And the way that they did it, the control from Babar, the missed chances from Australia, and even the late twist with Nathan Lyon picking up 2 wickets in 2 balls, and the drop catch from Khawaja off Rizwan, the Rizwan 100 against the grain of play to start moving through the gears. I mean, I'm rattling through it now, even though it was a draw and a lot of the cricket played was tough, hard cricket, it'll go down as a test match for me anyway that I feel privileged to have been at.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, while I'm totally accepting of the criticism of the Rawalpindi pitch and the match there in terms of just the spectacle, Karachi was anything but boring. I think it was a gripping match throughout, and the way that Pakistan held on for those 2 days in the final, and then towards the end when Rizwan got to the 100 towards the end. I mean, there was such a emotional strain there. Yeah, Bharat, your first full test in Pakistan, I'm imagining, watching your first full test. Tell us a bit about Karachi and your experience.
Yeah, I mean, Karachi is where I landed, and people generally say Karachi is a lot like Bombay. And you kind of get a feeling of why they say that because of the way the traffic is. And it's a very linear city. So everything is straight. Like, you land at the airport and the first thing they ask, like, I got into the hotel shuttle and they said, what time's your flight out from here? And I said, like, it's in the evening. Or it's in the afternoon. Oh, leave 2.5 hours before your flight. And that I felt like at that point, I felt like I was back in Bombay, because in Bombay, nobody speaks about distances, right? It's all about time.
How much time.
It's always about time. And just like, I mean, it was kind of surreal being in, you had to keep pinching yourself and telling yourself you're in Pakistan. Like, it still felt like I'm back home in India. I think the first thing that you realize is that the fact that 90% of the men are in salwar kameezes, which is the main difference you find the minute you land in Pakistan. I mean, Karachi itself was. We went out, Adam and I went to Zainab Market, and we also did go to the Karachi Gymkhana, which is next door to our hotel, which is where, plays such a big role in the history of Pakistan cricket, because they famously beat the MCC in 1951, and that's what got them test status. So Adam and I went and met this photographer, this legendary photographer, called Iqbal Munir, who used to literally travel with the Pakistan team and stay with them. Like, he was Salim Malik's roommate during the 1992 World Cup, which is kind of bizarre when you think about it. And he brought these 2 books that he got printed along with him. One was called An Eye on Imran. So it was some incredible pictures of Imran Khan, like intimate, like him sitting in his bedroom in London, and just some intimate moments. The side of Imran Khan that I don't think many people have seen. So that was one book, and the other book was all about the '92 World Cup. He tracks the whole journey, from the warm-up games to the final, or he starts from the final and goes back. And there's this amazing picture of Salim Malik just sitting on the windowsill in their hotel, and you can see the MCG lights. So, and then he explains I don't know whether it said in the caption or he told us the story. He said it's 3 a.m. after the night that Pakistan have won the World Cup, and Salim Malik still can't believe that they did it. And he's just sitting there and watching the MCG lights, which haven't been turned off. So some beautiful pictures like that. And he just walked us around. Classic colonial era Gymkhana, much like the CCI. There's a squash club, and like the great Jansher Khan and Jahangir Khan, they all came from that club. So it was quite, a good morning for Adam and I just to walk around the pitch. And by that time, already the pitch was, the main focus of most conversations, because I remember watching the nets like I happened to do most times before the game, and David Warner and Stephen Smith were trying everything they could to scuff up the pitch. And the discussion between them was whether the pitch the Karachi pitch would play like Pune or whether it would play like Bangalore from 2017. David Warner was convinced that it would be Bangalore. Nobody asked me, but I said, I think it'll be like Pune. And then Steve Smith seemed very convinced, like he generally is whenever I tell him something from behind the net. So they really expected this to be a short game where the ball would start turning square from very early on. So that's why Australia were very happy to win the toss and to bat first. And I remember on day one, another memory I will hold very dear to me is there was a 19-year-old impressionable kid who was carrying a poster where he which is dedicated to me sadly.
Oh.
Sadly. So he'd even drawn like 2 caricatures of me. He'd like gone and downloaded 2 pictures, but not very complimentary pictures, I should say, from the internet. And like he'd drawn 2 caricatures, and he called me the king and all that. So he messaged me and he said, I'm bringing like this poster for you, which is kind of funny. So I did go during the tea break to meet him. And there were other people who just came and spoke to me. And one of them said, like, I said, sir, will this pitch even break up? Because Australia looked in command on day one. Of course, Khawaja was batting beautifully. And the old guy said, everything breaks up in Karachi. And I thought, I remember coming back and telling Adam, my intro is done for the day. That's the first
You
time.
used it too. I remember.
I did. I waited 4 days to use it because it didn't break up. And I used it for Babar Azam. And, that's what, so the Australians really expected the pitch to become more and more difficult, but it really didn't. And as well as Pakistan batted, and I'm sure we'll talk about the Babar Azam innings, but it really didn't offer the kind of assistance that the spinners expected.
Yeah, so at this point, Adam needs to take off. He has an important thing coming up in a few minutes. So, yeah, thanks so much for joining, Adam. And, we'll any closing comments before we continue with Bharat?
Yeah, well, look, just that you're going to move on to Lahore, which will always be a special city to me. In fact, I think they all will be. I look forward to getting back to Pakistan as soon as I can. I had what will probably go down as a life-changing experience in Lahore when I was involved in a dreadful car accident. And I'm fine, by the way, for listeners who don't know the story. I mean, you can listen to it elsewhere. But the point being is that I think for some people that might be a hurdle to clear about remembering the positives. For me, it's the very opposite. I view that as something that could have happened anywhere. And even in that moment of strife, and it was strife, when things could have gone either way, with all the confusion and chaos of that moment, that my first experience of Pakistan were that people had my back and were looking out for me and wanted me to be safe and happy and experience their country and proud of their country. And that's my last memory as well, that when that awful thing happened, when we were on the way to the airport, the instinct of everybody around me was to support me, which was enormously appreciated. And that was the same everywhere, from the moment we arrived till the moment we took off. And I hope that many other journalists and many other fans get the chance to visit Pakistan, and not just from Anglo nations either. Like, I joked about it before that Abdullah Shafique will never play Test cricket against India. I do hope that, and maybe I'm being overly optimistic here as a sort of an outsider to the conflict, but I truly hope that that all nations can visit Pakistan, including India, and vice versa, because it is something that was a precious experience after so long, and one that I look forward to replicating in the future. And I hope that the visit that I make next to Pakistan won't be a novelty, that it'll be part of the schedule. It will be routine, that as cricket journalists and as people covering the game, that going to Pakistan is exactly the same as going to New Zealand or going to India or going to South Africa. And hopefully our visit there, and by our, I mean the entirety of the Australian delegation who went, will have helped in some small way normalise that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for joining. And thank you so much for also making it to Pakistan and documenting what you saw and what you felt, what you experienced. I'm sure that people will refer to it many years down the line and understand what a historic moment it was. Thanks, Adam.
Thanks, fellas.
Yeah, so Bharat, 2 things about the Karachi Test to catch on. One is, of course, the debut of Mitchell Swepson. Especially coming after the Shane Warne news, it was almost like the passing of the baton, the new leg spinner coming in. A lot of hopes for, a lot of thoughts for Australians about leg spin and a lot of hopes for him. So let's start with that, and then let's, of course, move on to the great spell of reverse swing that Cummins and Starc put together. Almost an ode, as you wrote an ode to Wasim and Waqar in the land of reverse swing. Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the thing with Swepson is that I've just been fortunate to see a lot more of him than a lot of other Australian journalists have, purely because they had the Sheffield Shield hub in Adelaide in 2020, 2021. And also Queensland ended up playing quite a few matches here during this summer as well. So I have seen a lot of Mitchell Swepson bowl long spells for Queensland, win the matches late in that, on day 4 against South Australia, against Tasmania. So I kind of knew what kind of bowler he was. And I did have, I wouldn't say doubts, but I wanted to wait and see whether he could have the kind of impact on those pitches with his style of bowling. And in that little press conference he did with us, I remember asking him about that as well, about this change in approach from the bowler he was. And he said that Shane Warne was the one who asked him to slow down his approach, but at the same time start bowling slightly quicker. So he did start bowling flatter so that he would get more control. So I wanted to wait and see if that kind of leg spin would pay dividends against Pakistani batters on a pitch which wasn't breaking up and which was really slow. So there was so much time for the Pakistani batters to just adjust, even if there was turn. And I thought he bowled well in the first innings. He got Babar out. A very good first wicket to have in Test cricket. And he finished off that innings after the reverse swing happened. There was just so much pressure on him going into day 5 especially. And the first spell, you could see he was so nervous. He barely could land the ball. He bowled a lot of full tosses. And I think that kind of crushed his confidence. And he came back well in the second session. But, it just wasn't meant to be. 2 catches were dropped back-to-back balls at silly point and short leg, which I've never seen happen before. Like Manas Labushaine's right hand and Travis Head's right hand back-to-back. And then, of course, that late drop of, where Usman Khawaja just dropped a easy catch while wearing a helmet at short cover. Maybe it might not have mattered. Like Pakistan just had to see out 3 overs and they still had Hassan Ali to come and Shaheen Afridi and Noman Ali was looking pretty solid. But yeah, it could have, turned his way as well. He could have been a match winner on debut, but it wasn't to be. And I thought I wasn't personally too surprised that he didn't have that immediate impact that everybody expected, especially it was also an emotional expectation because of Shane Warne, the test match being played within just a few days of Shane Warne's passing and the influence and the impact that Shane Warne had on Mitchell Swepson's career. He'd always backed him. So it was slightly disappointing for him. And I did fear whether, his test career would be stalled and Ashton Agar would be brought in for the 3rd test. Fortunately for Swepson, it didn't happen. But a good thing about Pat Cummins' captaincy that came through was he kept backing Swepson. Unlike in the Lahore test where he actually didn't go to him at all on day 5. Here he kept backing him and in fact even gave him the last over. And I remember asking Pat Cummins that. He said that with Swepson in that spell, he felt like every ball could take a wicket. So that was high praise coming from his captain. The one thing you noticed with the Karachi square was it was barren. It felt like you were in Rajasthan somewhere. It was just the pitch and it was so barren that you knew that there would be reverse swing. And what you realized with the Australian first innings, which lasted 2 days and 2.5 days really, was the danger period was between over number 20 and over number 40, when the ball was still hard and it was reversing. Because there was reverse swing later as well, but you could see it didn't have much of an impact. And that's why Usman Khawaja's innings and the way he batted on day 1 in that middle session was really important for Australia, and also told you at what level Usman Khawaja is batting right now. So that was very crucial. I mean, in the bigger picture, that maybe that session where not many runs were scored might not get spoken about as much. But that really set the tone for reverse swing. And, unfortunately for Pakistan, they looked solid in the first 20 overs. Imam and Abdullah Shafique looked comfortable. But then Imam made that one mistake, and I remember making this silly comment, but people liked it, that the reason why we lock our doors in India and Pakistan is you never know if you leave it ajar what will come through. And that's what Imam ul Haq did by stepping out to Nathan Lyon and playing an unnecessary shot, and he was caught at mid-on. And the timing was perfect. The ball had just started reversing and he threw his wicket away. And the next over, if you remember, Pat Cummins bowls this beautiful in-swinging Yorker to Babar Azam. And immediately Pat Cummins realized that this is the time. So even though Lyon had taken a wicket, he takes him out of the attack and brings Starc in. And then like I wrote, it was an ode to Wasim and Waqar and Shoaib Akhtar. It was almost like that Shoaib Akhtar spell to Dravid and Tendulkar in 1999. It was just unplayable reverse swing. Pakistan did not help their cause. Azhar Ali chased one in 1 over, was lucky not to get out, and played a similar shot in the next over of Starc. And that just opened the door again And then Starc was just unplayable. And see, it's also been a great period for Mitchell Starc. Like, he played all 5 Ashes tests. Not many thought he would be the fast bowler who would play all 5. And he's become a more confident bowler, with bowling at different stages as well. He seems to prefer playing under Pat Cummins, the fast bowling captain as well, you could see. And that spell was just something else. But the beauty was what Pat Cummins was doing at the other end. We've seen reverse swing, the full slinging action coming wide of the crease, left armour, the full ball reverse swinging. But Pat Cummins was getting it to go off a length. To the extent that you thought he was seaming the ball. And we were fortunate to have Waqar Younis as part of our panel. And I remember asking him about, how is he able to seam it? And he was like, no, that's not seam. The beauty of Pat Cummins is he's getting it to go so late that despite the ball not being very full, it's just reverse swinging in the air and then just going on in that direction. And that was just the balls he bowled to Mohammad Rizwan to get him out in that innings. You could just look at it in isolation and think maybe he's bowling at the Gabba or at the Adelaide Oval. And that's how brilliant Pat Cummins is. And I'm sure we'll talk about him in detail later. But it was just magical bowling. And, and as a lot of Pakistanis will tell you, fast bowlers win you test matches in Pakistan, not spinners. And that spell really justified it.
Yeah, I think we are going to talk about Babar. But Starc is the one who paved the way for Babar in a very roundabout way. If not for that collapse, I don't think we would have seen a lengthy Pakistan innings. At that one passage of play, thankfully, I had my laptop on for that when Imam played that stroke and he got caught at mid-on, and then something was happening, and then suddenly you see Azhar and Babar feeling their way. It was not like the first test when they were so calm and they were relaxed and you'll get to 20, 30 and then 50. Chalo ho jayega. This was like they were trying to fend things off and they were trying to, they were missing the ball by like centimeters. And then I thought, something's going to happen here. And then it happened. Azhar chased wide one to, I think, Cameron Green in slips. And then Fawad Alam got a screamer with his technique and Starc bowling right to his legs, where his legs would be if he were in a perfect batting position. That is a superb delivery that he got. And at that point in time, there was this feeling that because Fawad Alam didn't bat in the first test, I don't think he got to bat at all. In the second test, when this was all happening, that was my first thought. As he was walking to bat, I was like, oh God, he's going to get a Yorker, probably. Because of his stance and the way he comes to bat and all that, I thought it was going to happen. Amazingly, that's the thing that happened. The first ball, he got out first ball. And I started theorizing, is funky batting stance a good way of approaching Cummins or Starc? Because we know that he gets into proper batting stance by the time the bowler delivers the ball. But, I think that is a little bit of a disadvantage with these guys screaming in and, with the accuracy that these guys have. I mean, it was insane the way that Starc bowled those 3 wickets. And special one among those 3 wickets was Fawad Alam. But I thought the wicket of the innings was how Cummins bowled to Rizwan. The ball that just left him and then took the edge.
Exactly.
Insane bowling. Anyways, if I go about Cummins and Starc, this is the podcast. So I think we should move on to we have to move on to the last innings. Before I had a question for both of you. There was a small passage in play of 97 runs, which riled up a lot more people than the pitch itself. Because they were like, why didn't you put Pakistan in for the follow-on? Why were Australia batting? And that got amplified at the end because now Pakistan, saved the match by such a small margin. I didn't think that was such a big deal. I was wondering whether if you guys thought that was a big deal.
Not at all. No. I mean, there was no point, enforcing the follow-on because eventually, even after the declaration, Australia had 173 overs to bowl out Pakistan. And if you can't bowl a team out in 173, you're not going to do it in 190, as they say. But also, the whole situation of the match, you had to take into consideration because Australia had realized that it's, again, the 20 to 40 over period. And they weren't going to get that in on that third evening. So it didn't make sense to chumma and enforce the follow-on just to show some bravado. And also the Pat Cummins and Mitchell Starc had bowled 23 overs between them in that session. Lyon had hardly been used, and even Swepson had just bowled a few overs where he took those 2 wickets. So the fast bowlers were tired, and they're playing with 2 fast bowlers. I wasn't too surprised that even though they had a massive lead, it made sense to bat on. But I was watching that after Starc got Azhar Ali out, like flashing at one, as Fawad Alam was walking out, I was standing next to a Pakistani journalist. And like you, Shoka, we also said, Yorker, he's definitely in swinging Yorker, he's getting out. And either it'll be LBW or bold. And it just ended up being bold. So it was so obvious you could pick it. Like I think even Fawad Alam, like Adam said,
I think he had a premonition.
Yeah, and the dressing room was right under. I almost wanted to shout out and say, "Point nahi hai, mat ja, aise out hone wala hai. Inge pe solve rahenge." So it would have made more sense. I should have just done that.
Yeah, and also one point about the follow-on is like teams do it. They take various points into consideration. Like Bharat mentioned, the bowlers being tired. It could have been the weather could have been really hot as well. They wouldn't have probably want to go out. Also, it was the second test of the series. You want to maintain your bowling attack in shape through the whole series. So who knows? Maybe if it was the third test, maybe if they were trying to wrap up the victory, they would have gone for it. But, this is a sensible decision. I don't think there's anything majorly scandalous about it. And also you bat Pakistan out of the match. I mean, of course, Pakistan had an extraordinary batting performance after that. But still, I mean, what were their chances of winning that game? Australia had already batted them out. So Pakistan's best chance was to draw it. So I think that's all fine. But yeah, I mean, let's come to that extraordinary performance because, that Babar Azam's 196 and not just that, Abdullah Shafique too in that test match, Rizwan. I mean, there was something surreal about it. And, as you said, you're waiting for the pitch to break to do something. But they batted also so well. Not that the Australians bowled particularly badly. It's that the Pakistanis batted extraordinarily well.
No, very much so. And, the Babar Azam, when you think of Babar Azam, you think of cover drive and Virat Kohli comparisons and, all the shots he plays. But the grit and the commitment you need to bat for that long. And like you said, it was terribly hot. It was extremely hot on all 5 days. I think it was cloudy maybe for a while on day 5. But the one thing that didn't happen in the second innings was the ball didn't reverse too much. And my theory was, unlike in the first innings where Pakistan had scored a few runs in the first 20 overs and the ball had traveled on that square quite a bit, here in the first 20, 25 overs, they were just defending, obviously. So the ball hardly left the pitch. So I don't think it got scuffed up enough for them to generate that level of reverse swing. And I guess Pakistan are also waiting for that to happen. And they had Abdullah Shafique, unlike in the first innings where, if you remember, he was run out. But yeah, I mean, it was just... he looked impenetrable, Babar Azam, and he just kept batting. And it really, what the innings that put that innings into context is what he did maybe 2 weeks on from there, when he made that 73 ball 100 in the ODI and helped Pakistan reach their highest ever, total target to chase down. So you think about it, right? He bats he faces 425 balls to help Pakistan bat for more overs than any team has ever batted in a 5-day test to save a test. And 2 weeks later, against the same opposition, different bowling attack, lesser experience, he hits 173 balls to help them chase down the biggest target ever in 50-over cricket. So that just tells you the range and why I very, confidently announced that he is the best all-format batter. But taking yet another risk of saying that about a Pakistani batter.
Why are you doing this, Bharat? Why?
But yeah, Babar, the way he batted on day 4 and Abdullah Shafique, that drop catch from Steve Smith he was on 4, before he got to 30, was a big moment in that game. But yeah, I mean, and that's the beauty with Abdullah Shafique as well. He has he has every game. He made his first impact in T20 cricket, where he got 100 in the PSL. He has all the shots. I think he's already hit 7 sixes in Test cricket, and yet he can defend and defend and defend. And yes, the pitch didn't break up. The ball wasn't reversing enough, and you could see the other thing was Nathan Lyon. I mean, you could see the pressure on him building, and Nathan Lyon had already had 4 consecutive occasions where he couldn't bowl the opposition out. If you go back to the India series, in the England series where Sydney, where the only test that England saved. So that was weighing on him. And for the first time, I saw Nathan Lyon losing his cool. He was kicking the ground. There was that very close LBW shot that went against Australia, where just I think 52% of the ball was missing the stump, or maybe 51.8% was missing the stump. It was that close. And you could see he was every time he walked down to fine leg, he was unhappy with himself. He was unhappy with the world. And I remember Adam and I noticed at the end of the test, he was given the best bowler award. And you know how in India, Pakistan, they have some 95 awards for him. Every player gets an award, right? So ironically, he was given the best bowler award because he took those 2-3 wickets at the end. And he accepted the check, and as he just walked away, he just kind of chucked it away and walked off. So it really was weighing down on him. So I think Australia also started getting more and more desperate as Babar Azam kept batting. But it was just extraordinary. I mean, we don't get to see those kind of rearguard efforts these days in Test cricket. Not often enough. I mean, Pujara has played a few, there's this perception that Pujara has played many more knocks like that than he actually has. I mean, he has, but it hasn't done it as often as people assume he has. But I think that was just told you about Babar Azam's range and his just love for batting. And the best part is then he goes to Lahore, and I remember seeing him in the first net session after that. You batted for 425 balls. And then I see him, he's still worried about his head position and everything. If he's where his hip is while he's leaving the ball. I said, "Theek hai yaar." I mean, after 425 balls, if you still are unsure, it maybe tells you why he's so great or why he's so special.
But yeah, credit to Lyon also. I mean, sure, he didn't get the reward, but he was giving nothing away. I mean, there was a point when I think Rizwan and Babar were batting, and the commentators were speculating maybe they will go for the win, right? But you knew that was not going to happen because Lyon and to an extent even Swepson in later spells, they were giving nothing away and there was no runs to be had whatsoever. And once, I mean, that showed why, I mean, later when Babar got out, I doubt that even they were thinking that maybe there is a chance for us to win. And they were slightly a little bit more aggressive when, Babar was nearing his 200. But then he got out. I thought they'll put the shutters down. But no, they still started going for it. And only when they lost like 6 wickets, I think, then Rizwan started feeling the hit. And he was like, oh, shit, these things may go wrong here. When Lyon started getting those late wickets, they really got a scare there. But surprisingly, Pakistans were very positive in the chase towards the last end. I mean, at least approaching the last session, they were very positive. And that I thought was like, oh, okay, maybe we'll have a result. Maybe this will be wonderful.
I mean, this is like that Brisbane test, right, in 2016-17, when they went and made 450 runs in the final session. Ahsan Raza getting that 100. And they seem to have been in those positions, before also.
I think, if not for Babar Azam, that Mohammad Rizwan innings, honestly, if you ask me, for me was a greater innings than Babar Azam. The way he came and batted, the freedom with which he batted, in a situation where it was still Pakistan looking to draw the game, and leading into the last few overs as well, the way he played out the penultimate over of the day where he had to get to 100, and he's stepping out to Nathan Lyon, getting a leading edge, almost getting caught and bowled, and still stepping out once more to drive him for a boundary and reaching his 100 just before, or reaching his 100 of the last ball of the penultimate over with a single, which also ensured that he would get to face the last over. It was just, we speak about Virat Kohli, Babar Azam, that comparison, but I think this Rizwan Rishabh Pant comparison is going to take off very soon. It was quite a knock. And it's funny, Adam's not here, but we were on commentary, and a lot of these, at least Adam and Jeff, were being very Aussie about it. Man, they're going for it, man. They're going for it. We're going to have this dramatic end. They're going for the run chase. And I was like the cynical Tamil mama. No, draw, only draw. I mean, it was funny. And this was happening on air. Jeff and Adam are building up this excitement about how Rizwan's going for it. Because first over after tea, I think they got 15 runs or something. Rizwan hit 3 or 4 boundaries. But that was just told you a lot about Rizwan. The way he thinks about cricket. If there was a ball to be put away, he was batting normally, boundary ball, or even semi-boundary ball, he was putting it away. But even on air, I had to like kind of, kept poking the balloon. Like every time they got excited, I was like, draw. They're playing for draw only. There's going to be no dramatic run chase. I think one part of me also was like, writing about a draw is at times easier than writing about this dramatic run chase, as Sid, you'll know.
Okay. So Rizwan is Pant, Babar is Kohli, Rohit is Abdullah Shafique, I think. KL Rahul is Imamul Haq. What? Where? We can just keep continuing like this, is it?
Our podcast is banned. That's it. Done.
I know. And then we'll have to talk about the bowlers as well. Like Shaheen Shah Afridi is maybe left arm
Bumrah. Left arm Bumrah.
Yeah. True, yeah.
And Nasim Shah. Nasim Shah can be, he
any
had
of the new,
like exactly
all these IPL fast bowlers. Yeah, so many.
If you can start the third test, we can also talk about Nasim Shah being.
Yes. Let's come to that. Good. We shouldn't, there was that test as well, which had a result, the only test that had the result. Lahore, another, again, historic cricket venue. Completely different from Karachi, I'm sure, Bharat, because when I was there in 2006, I was like, am I in a different country now? What is this? Of course, I had the reverse experience. I had Lahore first and then Karachi, but you went the other way. And so, talk a bit about just Lahore and then building up to the test.
And like that's the whole Karachi, Bombay, Lahore, Delhi comparisons that people make, right? But I found Lahore to be way more laid back than Delhi. And less aspirational. Like in Karachi, you could see just with all the buildings coming up. I'm sure things have changed since the time you were there. And it's in like Bombay in the sense that it's spreading. You can see it spreading like in terms of buildings coming up everywhere. And a lot of people there told me as well. It's the one line they used was like it spreading like adrak, like the
ginger
fingers on the hand of a piece of ginger. But you go to Lahore, like the first thing you hear is this is all old wealth. Like, we depend on our farming. It's all about life is very slow here. We are not like Karachi. And that's the first thing you hear. And then a lot more greenery as well, like which is, I guess, a little bit like Delhi. Some parts of Lahore, I could kind of make out why people say it's like Delhi. But there are two sides to Lahore, right? Old Lahore is filled with history. So we went to the Lahore fort. We did the only touristy thing we did as a group. And, you see names like Shah Jahan and all. I got to use the name Shah Jahan in a cricket piece. I was so happy. Like I never thought I'll get to write about Shah Jahan. But because in our history, we are taught so much about the Mughal era. In Bombay, everything was about how Shivaji kicked butt. But Shivaji versus Aurangzeb was like Rock versus Austin for us growing up. But this
is the first time this comparison will be ever made.
At least from 3rd standard to 7th standard, like every year was a WrestleMania between those two. But the history of the place, and I was fortunate enough to then break away from the pack, and Bazid Khan, who's a wonderful man and a very good friend of mine, made sure that I got a very desi experience as well. He took me to this truck stop where all the real people of Pakistan come there and just eat what they eat, food from the northern belt. Pete Lawler and I walked the streets of Lahore, and Peter has, of course, spent a lot of time in India before he became a journalist. So it was like a nice throwback for him as well. I remember going to this place called Lakshmi Chowk, and someone recommended you just go walk the streets there. It's beautiful. But then I read about it, and it's amazing when you hear that that's where a lot of Indian cinema started, like Mohammad Rafi and those people started their career there. Mother India was made somewhere there allegedly, and I was walking up and down. There was this one old cinema, one of those classic scenes. This guy in a salwar kameez sitting outside. He saw me walk around. He asked me to come, and he didn't ask me to sit because Peter was there. He bought a chair for him. He got him to sit down, which is the flavor of my tour. The hospitality and all was mainly for. I was also felt very welcome, made to feel very welcome, but nobody asked me for too many selfies and all. It was Jeff Lemon and Mel Ferrell and all. And I was generally like, after they would have a debate of who will take the selfie, they would look at me and say, acha, aap hamara photo le lo. So I must have taken a lot of pictures of these people with random people. So, but yeah, so this guy just gave us a tour of the cinema. And this cinema is like, it is called Odeon Cinema, where funnily enough, in Ghatkopar, I watched my first ever movie in an Odeon cinema. So like that connect also was there. But, it was, so you walk inside and everything feels like old Lahore, feels like it hasn't changed since that era. Like it's so, and he told me this beautiful story that movie theater I went to was supposed to be launched on 14th August 1947, their Independence Day. But because it was the 27th day of Ramzan, they had to delay it by 3 days. So it kicked off or 3 days later. So just so much history to Lahore than in Karachi. Karachi is like, of course, more cosmopolitan and all that. And even the Urdu sounds more much more polished, if I could say so, with my limited knowledge of the language. So it had, like you said, Sid, it has such a different feel to it. And again, then the closeness to India, like you're 409 kilometers. That's like
Bangalore, Chennai.
Exactly, yeah. Literally, right? 3/4 to the way to Goa from Bombay. And Bombay, Goa, people do all the time. So it's funny how close you are to India. And you can sense a lot of that as well with our history and our common history that the two countries share.
Yeah. You spoke about how things were so different, but then the match started and then things were the same. Usman Khawaja continues from where he left off. Steve Smith gets runs in this test. And it's almost like, oh, okay, here we go again. Another 5 days of batting. Is that what we're going to see? But at the same time, again, I mean, what you see in the scorecard is one thing, but then Shaheen Shah Afridi and Naseem Shah, I mean, there was some quality bowling going on there as well. It was not as if the Australians were just making runs for fun. They were really battling it out. Yeah.
Oh, especially Naseem Shah. I mean, I thought Shaheen Shah Afridi was disappointing during the test series. You could make out that he got a little too desperate for wickets and he was struggling with his length. He was too full throughout. If you want to get a little too nuanced with our discussion, he would bowl a couple of overs where he was hitting the right lengths, and then he would start looking for wickets. I've never seen a fast bowler bowl so many Yorkers in a test series. He bowled a lot of Yorkers, so he became predictable after a point. And Hassan Ali, again, I don't know why they kept him for the third test. He really did let Pakistan down. But Naseem Shah, because I saw him make his debut at the Gabba, and he was this tearaway, lost his mother. So there was this whole, emotional side to his story as well. But he was all over the shop. But here, in the first 12 overs, he didn't get a wicket, but he had only conceded 14 runs. He was bowling exactly the length that you needed to bowl on that pitch. The hard lengths, as they say, which actually the Australians kind of then aped beautifully for the rest of that test match. And it wasn't easy going, but Usman Khawaja, the one takeaway from Karachi also was how they embraced him. He said that, Karachi is the land of the Khawajas when he landed. And at one moment that will remain with me forever is as he was walking off after making his 100 in Karachi, the whole stadium erupted in this chant of Khawaja, Khawaja. And, people talk about Chennai and Chennai applauding the opposition and all, but I've never seen even in India, maybe with AB de Villiers, in later years, but the support that some of the Australian players got from the Pakistani public, especially Khawaja, was next level. I've really never witnessed that before. And it was similar in Lahore, and he should have got to 100 in the first innings. He didn't. He did get to 100, didn't he? It's all mixed up in my head.
Yeah, too many 90s and 100s.
90s, yeah.
And he did get the second innings 100, of course. So, yeah, he didn't get the first innings 100. So, yeah, and Steve Smith, the elusive search for that test 100, it's been evading him. The whole debate of how he gets to 70, looks okay, and then, gets out. But it was all Naseem Shah. I mean, he turned the game around, you thought, with the way he bowled. Because at one point, yeah, you're right, it looked like Australia was going to bat for 3 days again. But that Naseem Shah spell and Shaheen later in the day, they really brought the game back to parity. And then you started getting a feeling that, yes, we will get a result in this test match.
Oh, yeah, especially Naseem Shah's ball to Cameron Green. That came in. Oh, shit. I was like, oh. Something's happening here.
and this was Cameron Green batting on 79.
Yeah.
It's not like a new batsman there. Yeah, so definitely. But yeah, talking about the way this was in a way the game switching so quickly, right? I mean, it happened in the first innings, and then it happened again in the second innings, almost like a repeat of Karachi in some ways, but also not a repeat because the it wasn't reverse swing this time, but it was just like high quality Cummins, Starc, just bowling. I mean, Pakistan were what? I'm looking at the scorecard.
Yeah.
They were, I think, 214 when Azhar Ali fell. That's 214 for 2. And then Azhar Ali gets caught and bowled to that magnificent catch. Yeah. I mean, what was that catch even? Where did it come from? How does one even take such a catch? I mean, this is like, hashtag what can't Cummins do, right? I mean, it's like, that's it. I mean, he's demigod there. But then 214 for 2 to like 268 all out. I mean, that was just chaos at that point.
Yeah, and Pakistan looked in such control that I remember saying on air that at this point, the only way we'll see a result is if Pakistan makes 700 or 600 and Australia are put under pressure. And you already started thinking about, I was actually getting excited about covering a 0-all like series, and not in a negative sense. I had never covered that in my life. So I was getting excited about how you would write about a 0-0 series result. And you're absolutely right. They looked in complete control, and such like a lovely story about Azhar Ali playing his first test match in Lahore after, I think, I don't remember the number now. So 15,600 balls he'd faced in test cricket before playing his first ball in front of his family. His kids have grown up now. You could see them at one point. He actually got distracted by his kids while he was taking strike. And test cricket coming back to Lahore. Like Karachi, Rawalpindi had seen some test cricket, but Lahore hadn't seen anything since that 2009 attack. And I remember every time we drove around that Liberty Circle, it was surreal. Like, in the first couple of days, it was just natural for all of us journalists to ask the driver where the terrorists were positioned and what happened exactly. So you felt guilty asking these questions, but you just had to. So, yeah, and then it just looked like Azhar Ali would get to that 100 and it would be just about all Pakistan from there. And then, like you said, like, that's the beauty of Pat Cummins. I don't know how he does it, but he's done it so many times. He just... even in that series against India, you almost felt that it was Cummins versus India in Brisbane when they chased that total down. And yeah, I mean, he just produces that catch. And again, his bowling changes, like the way he uses him, just tells you why I think there should be more fast bowling captains. Even yesterday on some show, I said there was this whole thing of who should be India's next test captain after Rohit and all that. I said it has to be Bumrah. I mean, there should be no debate, because that's the one thing, and we'll talk about it as we get into day 5 here as well. Having a fast bowling captain, even during the Ashes, that whole point of seizing the moment, like, you can only do it if you are yourself in a position to do it. It's one thing a captain throwing a ball to someone, but here, if you can do it yourself and you are Pat Cummins with those amazing blue eyes, you can do anything. And like, that's what they needed, that one breakthrough. He got it. And I thought he captained the side beautifully. He said that this is a 15-day test. And every time if there was no moment to be seized, he would create one, like that one Azhar Ali. And then again, going to Starc at the right time, and Rizwan came out to bat. I mean, Fawad Alam again, he just walks out and he starts. You can see that Starc would not just start warming up. He would at times want to start bowling mid-over if someone else is bowling, with Fawad Alam would walk out. So that's how obvious it felt that he would get him out. And that ball he bowled to Rizwan, it was very... not as dramatic as the one to James Vince, because this isn't the Ashes. And when it is not the Ashes, as we know, it doesn't get talked up as much. But it was as good a delivery. Mitchell Starc around the wicket, almost Wasim Akram-esque, the way he gets Rizwan out. But the moment he does that, Pat Cummins, you could see from the other end, immediately come into the attack. And that, maybe not as exciting as the first innings in Karachi, but if anything, more impactful, like the way they rolled over Pakistan.
Yeah, I would say this is more a collapse, because 214 for 2, you're not expecting much to happen, and then 260 all out, 260, 270 all out. So Karachi, at least you can expect like 60 for 3, 60 for 4, 148 is not that big of a surprise.
Yeah, I mean, and also talking about captaincy, right? I mean, we are living in the bowling era. So, more of a reason why bowlers should be captains more, because the conditions are favoring them. They are best equipped to judge the conditions. And like in Karachi, I mean, Nathan Lyon gets the wicket of Imam, but Cummins immediately senses the reverse swing going on here and he brings on Starc. And, that's like automatic. A bowler is thinking on his feet and he's bringing that on. So, Bumrah, all power to Bumrah to be next captain. The other thing, also, of course,
No, sorry. And also, when you are the strike bowler and you are captain, you know more about your body than any captain ever can, right? Like, so you know how many overs you have left in you. You know whether you can bowl that one extra over. And that happened. I think maybe it was that Azhar Ali wicket, or no, I think it was with Mitchell Starc, correct. Before he got Rizwan out, you could see that Starc had finished his spell. And then Pat Cummins had asked Cam Green to continue. No, in fact, I'll tell you exactly when it was. It was Babar Azam. Again, he was batting beautifully. Babar Azam looked set for 100 in that first innings. And then you could see that they'd got all those wickets and Stark's spell was over. And he'd asked Cameron Green to warm up. But then Pat Cummins gets Sajid Khan out. And immediately he runs to Cam Green and says, I'm sorry, Starc needs to bowl one more over. And that's the over where he gets Babar Azam out completely, derailing them. And only a fast bowling captain can do that, or a bowling captain can do that.
Absolutely, yeah. One point, though, I needed to bring up when you mentioned the Liberty Circle and the Lahore terrorist attack and things. I mean, what a poignant story of the umpire, Ahsan Raza, who was there on that day when the terrorist attack happened. He was in the bus. He was, he had been shot at. He was bleeding. And he had to have surgery. His life was in such danger. And then all these years later, he gets to umpire in a game in Lahore. And I'm sure he would have had to drive through that whole region as well. And imagine the things that were going through his head when he had to do it. I mean, what a remarkable story that was.
Yeah, and the thing about Ahsan Raza is unfortunately, I couldn't get to meet him because they're all part of the bubble. But Simon Katich, who was doing commentary with us, did, and he was amazed he was almost astonished that when very kind of sheepishly asked Ahsan Raza about what it felt like for him to come back. Not only did Ahsan Raza, with a big smile on his face, talk about how special a moment it was, but he lifted his shirt and he showed him scars of that wound because, like you said, I think one of his lungs were punctured and he could have easily lost his life. And, he was just a reserve umpire back then, 13 years ago. So he showed his wounds and, Simon wasn't sure if that's his personality or when you have that kind of a life-threatening or life and death situation in your life, which very few people do, maybe it just changes your perspective towards life, right? You start appreciating life a lot more. And speaking to people, he is that kind of larger than life character, or a fun-loving kind of guy. And I remember watching him the day before the test, where Usman Khawaja was just walking back and Ahsan Raza was walking into the Alimdar umpire's room. And I think if for all the things that I did on this tour, my greatest achievement was taking a picture of Alimdar, taking a picture of the Alimdar umpire's room, which I tweeted out. I waited for that moment. I just wanted to take a picture of Alimdar walking in, but he made it even better for me by actually standing there and taking a picture. But anyway, I remember Khawaja and Ahsan Raza meeting, and I couldn't totally pick up what it was about, but I mean what he was saying, but it was about that Lahore attack. And it's funny how once you experience something like that, you can talk very openly about what had happened. Yeah, and every day, like you said, he had to go past that same circle to come in. And now as a test umpire, and he had a very good test as well. Even stuff like picking out things like the batsman or the batter getting into the danger area. I mean, these are things as a young umpire I get excited about. So to see someone do that in a test match and actually pull up the senior umpire and say, this needs to be looked at, says a lot about him as an umpire. And it was so also poetic that the first major event in that game was Ahsan Raza getting an LBW right. It just kind of added that bit of extra drama to it.
It had to happen. It's almost completed a loop. So which brings us to the final day of the series. Pakistan chasing 351. They end day 4 on 73 for no loss. And going by what we had seen in Karachi, who knows? I mean, another couple of good partnerships, Babar Azam, Rizwan, Shafique, Abdullah, you never know what could happen. And it took quite a bowling performance from Lyon and Cummins and the rest, and even Starc, I would say, to wrap that win up.
I think Pakistan lost a bit of a plot when they were bowling second. They could have, bowled a little more tight. They just lost their plot completely. They were waiting for declaration, and Australia just made 220 very, very quickly. And because that was day 4, I think Pakistan would have had a good chance if they had, at least bowled proper line and length, so they could have delayed the declaration till early day 5. They gave Australia like 100 overs. Granted, they were 73 for no loss, but then still, that was the one place where they really, really lost the test match. I think till then, at least there was hope that something would happen. Like Babar would come back and do part 2 of his innings or whatnot, because there was lesser time than test 2.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, but also just pretty bold declaration, because again, the pitch wasn't like breaking up. There were some cracks, a few more cracks than in Karachi, and the rough spots, especially the way Nathan Lyon bowled in the latter half of his first innings, where he started giving the ball a lot more loop and they had silly point. You could see that the spinners will maybe come into the game a lot more than they did in Karachi. But still, 350 runs, you thought that Pakistan could chase it down, or whatever the target was set. So it was, I still think, a pretty bold declaration. And again, just an ode to Cummins' captaincy. Like whatever he said they would do before the tour began, like the whole 15-day test thing, or the fact that he said that there will be sessions where the run scoring will be very slow. Like, it will come down to us having to initiate, match turning situations and playing the long game. Like, you say all this, but he actually stuck to it till the very end. And I think that's what eventually won Australia that test. Like, to take 10 wickets, you still felt at one point that maybe Pakistan would... I still thought it was a tall order on that pitch. It was because it was slow for them to get a move on and risk, getting to that target and losing the series in a decider. But it really, Australia bowled them out rather than Pakistan getting themselves out on that final day.
So the final moment, I mean, of course, it had to be Cummins. It wouldn't have been apt otherwise. So were you in commentary? Were you in the press box? How was the feeling? Yeah, just the fact that you were present when, first of all, Australia won a series in Pakistan after playing there for so long, and you were there.
Yeah. I mean, I just missed being on air because Waqar Younis and Adam Collins were on air, and I guess it's only apt that Waqar Younis was on air and not me when the match finished. And funnily enough, Cummins gave Swepson 1 over, with just Naseem Shah left, and he had 6 balls at Naseem Shah. So again, it says a lot about Pat Cummins, the captain. He hadn't gone to Swepson at all. He bowled only 8 overs in that innings, I think. But he gave him that 1 over just to see if, Benur Qadir trophy ends with a leg spinner taking a wicket. Maybe that was his thought process. But once Swepson didn't take a wicket in that over, you just knew it had to end with Cummins. And the fact that in a pitch, in a series which was all about slow pitches and batting, the last image of that series would be 2 stumps just blown off and Pat Cummins.
Off stump and leg stump, that too.
Off stump and leg stump, which we rarely see happen these days, cartwheeling stumps. But on the slowest of the 3 slow pitches, for him to do that, it had to win. It took him 1 ball. It just summed up Pat Cummins, the man, the series, the moment. It was quite something. I mean, now I've gotten used to seeing Australia win at home, at least when India is not touring. But and I was there when they retained the Ashes in Manchester, which in an Ashes context is as good as winning, and seeing their celebration there. But this was a different kind of celebration. So as soon, of course, they celebrated, they got into a huddle and all that. But immediately there were smiles and hugs with the Pakistani players. And even as they were walking off, I saw Steve Smith and I couldn't make out the other Australian player walk towards the most packed stand next to their dressing room and sign pictures and T-shirts and shoes and all that. They spent 2 minutes doing that before they entered their own dressing room. It kind of summed up the whole bonhomie in the series, which you expected, but it was of another level. Like, we've seen Pakistan being very hospitable when you guys went in. I've heard a lot of stories from your colleagues from that era, but this was just something different. Like, yeah. And then immediately, of course, maybe they didn't have beers to drink for good, obvious reasons in the dressing room. But, it wasn't like Australia getting together and singing the team song there. They, in fact, went to the Pakistan dressing room. You could see David Warner and Shaheen Afridi, best friends, sitting together, Manas Labuschagne and Rizwan sitting together, and all these young Pakistani cricketers in that mix, just standing in awe and watching these big names talk with each other. So that really put the Test series into perspective. But also, I mean, the way Australia played, it just told you it's a different Australia. I mean, not just in terms of whether they've gone soft or not. Someone asked me yesterday on some show. I don't think it's about them going soft, but it's just them being less desperate to win. And that's what really won them the series in the end.
Yeah, I think, and also Cummins had a lot riding on this, right? With all the controversy over Justin Langer before the tour, the statement that he put out. And so for him also, it's like a personal triumph. I mean, you go there, you lead the side, you end up being the better team. I mean, I don't know what Babar Azam was talking about when he said we dominated 2 tests. I think he was talking about some previous series because Pakistan definitely did not dominate 2 tests in this series. Australia were the ones who dominated both Karachi and Lahore, and it was fitting that they ended up as the winning side. All right. So, we won't, we are running out of time here, and we won't get too detailed into the one-day series and the T20. But Bharat, closing thoughts, spent all this time in Pakistan on this tour, and, thoughts about both the cricket as well as the experience in general.
I'll just say this. It just fizzled out. Like, I was one of just 3 journalists to stay back for the one day as in the T20. But it was actually a pretty good one-day series. Like, we saw some very good matches, like 50-over cricket, exciting 50-over cricket. But
they chased 350 in that game, right? Something.
Yeah, and that was in the second game, and Babar Azam again, like I said earlier, 73 ball 100, batted beautifully. But you could see the energy had, I think the people are just a little tired as well. The whole being excited for 15 straight days, even though Rawalpindi was a dull test, and then that one-day series. And by the time we reached the T20, I think everybody was almost like not just one leg, but half their body was on the flight back home. And for me, for sure, it was kind of tiring being in the same city. The political turmoil in Pakistan at that point. So the whole one-day leg was shifted from Islamabad to Lahore. So just being in the same hotel, with all the security for 3 weeks, I don't know how the players deal with it. Honestly, I have so much respect for them and how they deal with bubbles. But overall, it was, I think the most... the word gets used a lot, so I won't say surreal, but it was an unreal kind of means the same, but it was unreal, because I never ever imagined myself going to Pakistan. 15 years I've been doing this. I thought it'll always evade me. I've even been to Zimbabwe now, so I never thought I'll go to Zimbabwe, but once that happened, I was like, I wish I'd started a little earlier. I would have gone Pakistan also. And not to, not as a box to tick, but just to, once and for all, get rid of the curiosity of what is it like across the border. And I can tell you, it's just a lot of it is a lot like, what we get in India. But it is different. And I might sound a little like a little soak here, but you do get a feeling at some point, you just have that feeling, if only the British hadn't invaded us, if only we were allowed to be one country, and not just for cricketing reasons. There's so much we could have achieved as one nation. And again, like I said, to all our Indian listeners, seriously, I'm telling you, the Pakistanis don't care as much about us as we seem to do about them. And in a negative sense, I'm saying, I'm sure it's not going to change perceptions over time. And I'm not even talking about social media. But if you do get a chance to meet a Pakistani, if you live in India, or if hopefully, someday you get to visit there, make the most of it. It's just a pity that I couldn't go to the other parts of Pakistan. Hopefully someday I get to do that, but with an Australian passport.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'll sort of raise your jealousy a bit by saying that I have been to Peshawar in 2006, which, when I think of even today, I'm like, how the hell did that happen? And
exactly,
will I ever get to go to that part of the world again? I doubt it, but I hope that is not the case. But yes, I mean, any kind of people-to-people interaction just completely alters your attitude about any place, right? I mean, whether it's America or England or Australia, just going there and meeting somebody there and chatting to them over a period, over half an hour, 10 minutes even, begin to realize, I mean, there is the perception that you have in your head and the reality that you're actually experiencing are two vastly different things. And how, I mean, it's not to say that the perception is entirely incorrect, but there are a lot of gaps in your understanding that you can easily overcome with this talking to somebody. So, yeah, I mean, having said that, yeah, here's more to tours to Pakistan, cricket tours to Pakistan, teams going there and playing there, crowds there enjoying cricket, seeing high quality players come through and play. And yeah, at some point of time, if, we can see more of India-Pakistan cricket in non-neutral venues, then nothing like it. But yeah, I'm not holding my breath on that for the moment. Okay, man. Okay, thanks, Bharat. Thanks, Ashoka. This was great. And yeah, as ever, rate, review the podcast. Check out our website. Recommend it to people. We are also republishing books these days. So War Minus the Shooting, available on Amazon and various other platforms. I'll put the link out there. And yeah, hoping to publish another book soon, and also hoping to see you in another podcast soon. So, thank you, Bharat. Thanks a lot.
India have won the Test match. India have won the series. They're going to get back for two. India home. Lords goes wild.